And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts.
Good morning. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is Monday and it is still 2020, so you still can't relax. We still have partially 1 month to get through before this the year from hell all comes to an end. It is a lovely Monday morning, if not cold, here in Canada, where the coronavirus is on the rise, but compared to the US, that really doesn't mean anything. We are very excited, though, to see how the vaccine does in the US, because they've already told us that we're not getting it for a while, kind of like, you know, the middle child that gets the hand-me-downs from the older children. But we'll see what's happening with that. But first of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host, the lovely and talented Kerri Barber. Good morning, Kerri.
Good morning. Happy Monday, Andy. So happy to be here. And I got to give another shout out to the Aveda Institute, the college here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Students did a fantastic job, totally safe. In fact, I got to say that they were more conscious about health issues than even the doctor's office I went to last week. So I really appreciated that. And I even let them pick the color. So they picked a nice dark cherry. I'm getting used to it. But yeah, fantastic job. So if you are in need of any hair care products or just, good Lord, some self-care, be comfortable going there. And no, I am not being paid. No, I'm not getting a discount. I'm just shout out to them.
Hang on.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you go like 8 months without a haircut?
I sure did.
And then you just got one like a little while ago.
Well, let me tell you what happened was
Okay.
I went for my haircut in Chicago, and I went to a very small location. One person, I wore a mask the entire time. And then as I'm coming out, her next client was there with her two daughters, none of them wearing masks. And I looked at them, looked at her, I'm like, do you mean that I just spent an hour and a half trying to be very conscious? And this is what you allow? Really? You've put me at danger, yourself and your other clients. So no, so I didn't go back. But my experience with the Aveda College, completely different. Everything was sanitized. You had to wash your hands and sanitize your hands. The surfaces, everybody wore masks. Everybody was very serious and diligent about it, and even sanitized the pens that you signed paperwork with. To pay, you had to use your own card, not let it out of your hand. It was just, they were just right on point with the governor's orders, and then above and beyond. So I don't have the same qualms with local businesses the way that I did, in Chicago, where they still believe it's a hoax.
So does that, the college that you went to, is that specifically for, or do they have a department for a hairdresser school, like, or a stylist
yeah.
school?
So each one of the big brands has their own university where they teach various facets of their products and all of these things. So this one was for Aveda. It's a national brand, national salons.
Oh,
and
okay.
So if you want to be Aveda certified, you have to go through this intensive beauty college, basically. And they do everything there, absolutely everything there. And like I said, I was so comfortable. And we know I'm in a high risk group. So for me to be okay with it, yeah, like I said, they took more precautions than the doctor's office I had to go to last week. So,
well, and it's totally in their best interest, right? Because, the rollout of the vaccine is going to take longer than anybody thinks anyways, right? And so if you want to stay in business, follow the protocols to the letter, right? Because then your own specific spot isn't going to necessarily cause anything, right? Because the last thing you want is to get a reputation of someone that, oh, look, it was a super spreader event on Tuesday because somebody came in not wearing a mask, right? That just makes business sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And while I was there, now you've got rows and rows of stations, but nobody was right next to each other. Nobody was even across from each other. And when two of the students were a little bit too close, there was another student right there going, hey guys, back up a little bit. So they're all working together. From my view, they were working together to make sure that, number one, this is a graduating class, they graduate next week, that they can continue doing their studies and go on and be successful in their own businesses or at a different salon. So yeah, you're right. This is where small businesses really have a vested interest in making sure that they stay open. And, it's not a good business model where you're making your clientele sick or die. That's just, then you become the Republican Party. So,
yes, absolutely. If you've come out of the womb, you're no longer protected.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah,
so these students that graduate next week, you're like their final.
Yeah, and they so there was it was kind of cute because apparently in Albuquerque you don't get many gingers, so they were very excited. And so I let them pick their hair color, and of course that elicited quite a few squeeze. So they were very excited, and there was a conclave about which colors and which style to do. So they were all working to. I was like just sitting there being their master study, and they did a fantastic job. So no complaints.
Good. That's good. Yeah. It's like, you're going out of the world now. You're going to have customers. If you can deal with this one, it's like you're like New York City. If you can make it there.
Okay, well, I will try not to take that personally, but
no, you're tough but fair.
Right, exactly. No, it was fine. It was fine. So, I really appreciated that. So, Andy, let's get into some other American exceptionalism CovIdiots.
If we must.
Yes. Well, this is kind of a good segue into how Americans have become. What did my husband say today? He's like, we are the drunk uncle at Thanksgiving now for the rest of the world. The old beat up Ford up on blocks in the front yard. People come to expect this now from Americans, but I pulled out 3. Well, I think actually 4. So this is the first 3 examples of how Americans are being just ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. So the first story, this was sent to me by one of my former colleagues who now lives in Toronto, laughing about us. And Andy said it last week. It's like 70% of the Canadian population is lined up on the border with popcorn now, watching the shit show to the south. So this is kind of an example of this. In Canada, they closed the border, but there's this thing that they call the Alaska loophole, because you've got an American state on the other side of the Canadian border. So what they were saying is, okay, if you're an American and you're going from Washington State to Alaska or anywhere in between, we'll let you pass, but you got to keep going. You got to stay on that highway and you got to get to your destination, right? So there were complaints because Americans were not following those orders, because our freedoms apparently extend to other countries. Not so much. So people were getting off the highway and they were literally getting harassed. And what was hilarious is Canadians have such a nice way of doing it. They only shouted at them, hey, get back in your car. Well, that was the wrong accent, but they were just shouting at them. Occasionally they get really mad and they key a car. So one gentleman who, guess which state he's from, he decided that he was going to totally flaunt this rule and get off the highway, not once, not but twice, maybe some other times that we know of. But he was warned politely the first time when they caught him at a nightclub way off the highway, like 60 miles from the highway. He had been reported and everyone said, hey, come get this guy. So they were nice enough to admonish him and say, hey, get back on the road. The next day, they caught him again at another nightclub. So he's facing a hefty fine now. And I don't know if he's actually been convicted just yet, but this gentleman was from Kentucky. So shout out to Kentucky. Wonderful export to Canada you have there. So that was the first one. Andy, I know you got a comment on this one.
No, I don't. Well, my first comment is you referred to it as a nightclub. It's more likely referred to as the hotel.
As in HOE?
The hotel. No, just that's what Canadians would call the place to go down and drink. Where are you headed? We're headed down to the hotel.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Now that makes sense. I thought maybe you were referring to a strip club.
No. Canadians are too polite for a strip club because you have to ask permission.
You have to have what?
No, I'm not going any farther than that. It's going to get me in trouble.
Okay, all right. So we'll skip that one. Nurse Deb may be watching, but we'll skip it. So then the other two examples were these two men from Florida, had to be fucking Florida, in Colombia got arrested. And of course, they were leaders of a church, a non-taxed entity who were down in Colombia selling a snake oil made of bleach that actually killed 7 people. And they were arrested trying to say that, yeah, this is a COVID cure. It was not hydrochloroquine. It was bleach and something else. Apparently they couldn't afford that. They actually killed 7 people. Here's the karma on that. Those 7 people that they killed, Americans. So yeah, we're stupid everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. And then the headline that came out last week, the couple who flew and were stuck in, I think it was Seattle, and they were informed that they had a positive COVID test and were admonished not to board their flight home to Hawaii. They were told, you have a positive test. So what did they do? Boarded their flight anyway. And they were arrested and charged. It's a 2nd-degree charge. This is serious. So they are charged now, and their child that they were traveling with, a 4-year-old, has been taken into custody of another family member. So they lost their child. They're in 2nd-degree charges. They are sitting in quarantine right now and will be probably sitting in jail for quite a while because rules don't apply to me, and screw all the people sitting next to me. How do you sit on a plane? You're packed in there knowing that you have COVID, and everyone that you see now could get it from you with the recycled air and everything else. Everything you touch, every word you say, everything now is exposed to the same virus, and some of them may die. So in Illinois now, 1 of every 1,000 people in the state has died from COVID, but it's still a hoax, and you got shit to do, right?
Yeah, but how is that ideology any different than someone who's got healthcare through their employer, right? And saying, well, I don't care about Medicare for all because I'm good, right? Like that's the kind of the mentality.
Totally different. And I cannot wait to explain that to you coming up here in just a moment.
All right.
Hold on to that thought.
Gotcha.
So the last one I want to get to is a comparison, right? And you brought up Medicare for all. Let's talk about a country that does have socialized healthcare, a national healthcare program, and this is Australia. And the reason why I think that this is a really good example, even though their population's smaller, the country's smaller, these are our fucking cousins, right? So the entire country was populated the same way the United States was populated. You had the British going, okay, you rabble-rousers, mostly Irish, you troublemakers, all of this, we're going to put you on a barge and you're going to go populate this colony for us, right? So if you know Celtic history at all, That's where the US and Australian populations came from. So these are literally our cousins. And what happened? So if you look at the timeline and their case history, in July and August, they had their second wave. That is their winter. So for those of you who don't know, they are opposite. They are south of the equator. So their winter is July and August. So they had their spike when everybody is colder weather, inside, indoors, doing this sort of thing. But here's what they did differently. Right now, today, if you are in Australia, you can go to a restaurant, you can go to a store, you can do everything you possibly want, no mask. How? How did they do it? Well, in Australia, they are not a fully autonomous government region. They have provinces, they have different areas, they have local government. But when the COVID cases nationwide reached more than 6, not 6,000, not 60,000, 6, everything shuts down. Absolutely everything shuts down. So on the side of this graphic, might be a little bit hard to read, but are all the programs that the government put in place. They were paying people to stay home. They were paying small businesses. Retirees got extra money. If you were unemployed for some reason, you got extra money. If you had a small business and you needed help making payroll, you got extra money. If you had a retirement account you needed to pull money from, you got that. And it wasn't a loan. All of these things happened in Australia so that when you had 6 cases or more, everything shut down. Borders, everything, store, and they did that for 2-week increments so that whoever had it could be isolated and not spread it to other people. It was not a matter of personal freedom, it was national survival. So today, they are open. They're open and everybody's doing what they need to do and surviving. And, there are some hardship cases, absolutely. But on a national level, it was just handled completely different than the way that's been handled in the US. And you can see that the data doesn't lie. Look at our spike and look at what's going on here and the number of small businesses that are going under, the number of jobs that are now permanently gone, the unemployment rate, all of these things. It is a really stark contrast between how the nations handled it. So I bring that up to talk about and bring on our guest. This is someone we've had on before. I personally love the way that he handles breaking down and curating news stories on Howell Underground. It's a YouTube channel, Howell Underground. This is Allen Howell. So thank you, Allen, for joining us this morning. Very much appreciate you being here on this bright Monday morning. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
So, Allen, anybody who's tuning into your channel for the first time might say, oh, this dude's super angry, super angry. How do you explain it?
That sounds like what they said about Bernie all the time on MSDNC. Oh, this is an old, angry Jewish dude. Look at it. He never smiles. And then they got the refutation later. Yeah, I'm a happy-go-lucky, non-raging individual, I promise.
Well, all right, non-raging. Well, we'll see if that holds this morning. So we brought on Allen because Allen has some definite opinions. And I got to say this about Allen. While a lot of the progressive left kind of vacillated a little bit, like we understand that there was the Dem Inter push and the Dem exit push and all of this sort of thing. Allen held his ground, absolutely held his ground and refused to budge from principled stances. So I wanted to talk to him a little bit this morning about the CARES Act. Now that we might have the new HEROES Act or whatever the hell they're going to call it coming out as of today with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and their bipartisan buddies, Steve Mnuchin, who is in a blue jumpsuit, but still a Republican. So all of that may come out today. So let's take a look back at the CARES Act, how that came to be. We've seen it fully implemented. And then now this new one that's coming out that sounds like it might not be as big as the last one. I'm not sure. So Alan, your thoughts on the CARES Act? It worked, right?
Do you mind if we go back and talk about CovIdiots for a second?
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, I came to be in the Pacific Northwest, son of a logger, and I'm decidedly, I'm extremely left, but the horseshoe theory almost is a circle in my case. So I think, and I was thinking about Australians and Canadians, and there are rugged individualists, many in both countries. Speaking anecdotally, I know loggers and truckers from Canada, and I know pundits through the interwebs in Australia. And I've found that there are many rugged individualists, but what they've decided is that they need to give up their individualism momentarily to become collectivists when it really matters. So you can be an individualist and preserve your individual freedoms by working together with other people, if that makes sense. It's kind of counterintuitive, but I'd say that the people who make fun of Trump supporters tend to be looked at more as moderates than as true leftists, because a true leftist looks at life kind of from the grubby populist perspective. Workers unite. Workers, but especially the working poor, are the backbone of any true leftist movement. So in many ways, it isn't the far right that is the enemy of the left. It's more the moderate, sneering, condescending elitists in the middle who would make fun of CovIdiots. They're perceived more as the enemy of grubby populism, whether it's right or left grubby populism.
Okay, interesting perspective. So what you're saying then, like the example that we're seeing 250 million farmers in India staging a worker strike, that they represent the foundation, and the white collar worker, blue collar worker who joined them followed their lead.
Yeah, that's a great example. Also in Paris, when you have people protesting against the Black Lives Matter, well, they're protesting George Floyd's murder, but they're also protesting Macron and his fascistic legislation. He's trying to make it illegal to film police. And so you've got grubby people all over the world fighting back against neoliberalism. And so it's probably not in anyone's best interests to make fun of CovIdiots or anti-maskers or anti-vaxxers, or, you look at the way identity politics works, and we fight back against people. We're divided, and I know you and I have talked before about this, that the oligarchy wants us to be divided along class lines and along race lines. They don't want people, the grubby populists, to figure out that they have most everything in common. They have divisions about social issues. And so the making fun of Trumpists seems to be kind of a snooty way of negating the kind of unity we need. We don't need unity between leftists and moderates. We need unity between leftists and populists.
Okay, so I'm going to push back just a little bit. So
I thought you would.
Yeah. So if you have a person who refuses to wear a mask because my freedoms, and they are actually literally posing a risk to other people, where do their freedoms end at that point?
That's a great question. So if you're thinking about my individual freedoms matter more than your safety, then you're an asshole. The way I bring it in is do no harm, take no shit. So of course you're an asshole if you put other people at risk. But if you're still a rugged individualist who isn't an asshole, what you do is you keep your distance from other people so you don't have to wear a mask, and you work with other people wearing a mask, I assume, if you're near them, to try to figure out how to do what Australia did. Because in a way, if you really want your freedom not to wear a mask, then you think about collective solutions that allow you to retain your individualism without harming people. And that's the best of both worlds. Then you don't have to be like a traditional liberal. Then you can be like a rugged, free-spirited leftist, or a rugged, free-spirited rightist, and not give up your individual freedom as long as you're willing not to harm people and work together with people when necessary to get that done. And that's also sounding like an anarchist, I admit, which I am. So if you're an anarchist, you also need to work collectively as much as you need to, so that you don't need to on down the road.
Okay, all right, Andy, do you still have that graphic of the doctor?
Of the doctor.
That guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
hang on.
And here we have a CovIdiot, in my opinion, and a Trump supporter, a rugged individualist from, where's he from? Washington or Oregon? I forget.
That's where I'm from.
Okay, so this is the guy that you're talking about. And he went on to a rally, a Trump rally, and admitted, as a physician who took a Hippocratic oath, pays liability insurance. He went on to admit that he and his staff do not wear masks, admonish anyone who walks into their clinic to take off their masks and reclaim their freedoms. And he has since lost his license. He is no longer a doctor in that state. He cannot legally practice because of liability and giving some really sketchy advice to patients about how viruses work and contracted. So how do you handle this, doctor? What is your advice here, right? So he's your rugged individualist. He's pulling himself up by his bootstraps. He put himself through school. He's paying his liability, and he's a small business owner. Now what, Alan?
He's an asshole. You have to admit. He left out the part about do no harm.
Agreed.
He needed to work to avoid harming people, and then he could have done what Australia did.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So
what's the Hippocratic Oath?
Oh, the Hippocratic Oath
Do no harm.
Yeah,
do no
harm.
harm.
Yep. And ironically, in journalism, there is a handbook and a guide that has the same thing about ethics, journalism ethics. And I would really like to make that popular again in our profession, but I digress.
The other one thing that you have to remember is that most Americans live in an echo chamber, right? They only seek out opinions that are similar to their own, right? And so if you're a Trump supporter, and you're trying to feel your way through the pandemic as safely as you can, because let's not assume that these are all total idiots and racists, and they might just be people that are pushing back against the neoliberal regime, which I've said for a long time, which is why I agree with Alan that leftists have more in common with Trump supporters than they do with the moderates, right? So they're getting at best mixed messages from the administration, from the White House. And so how do you process that, right? If you're a advocate of listening to Fox News or any of the quote unquote right wing media that's in the mainstream, you have to weigh your own personal safety and the safety of your family with the message that's coming out of the White House, right? And that's not an easy thing for an American. And I don't mean that to be mean about that. I'm just, that's just the way that society in the U.S. has come to this, right?
Good point.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to the CARES Act, right? So here's the problem, right? We have the example of Australia, but then in the U.S., we still had $1,200 payments for people, right? So that's a lot of money, isn't it? I mean,
Crumbs.
What do you mean crumbs? Is $1,200?
Crumbs, $1,200 once? That's crumbs compared to Australia.
Okay, yes, I'll give that to you, $1,200. But we also had the eviction moratorium. That should help people.
Ending at the end of this month.
Okay, so then we.
It's also a moratorium. It's not cancellation. So all of that money is going to have to be paid up front as soon as it ends. And I don't know a lot of Americans that were able to save money during the pandemic. So that could be problematic.
A cliff. It's a cliff, a looming cliff.
Well, okay, so we have the incoming administration that can handle it all now, and obviously we saw Biden, who was committing to absolving or getting rid of the first $10,000 of student loans. That's got to do something.
Crumbs,
right?
Crumbs, austerity, crumbs.
Okay, all right. So, but there was a program that I talked about 2 weeks ago, this part of the CARES Act, that if you have a 401k or some type of savings vehicle for retirement, you could now borrow $100,000 against your retirement without the penalty. That's a lot of money. $100,000 is way more than $1,200, and that would save a small business owner, wouldn't it?
I did that. I'm a small business owner, and that's going to run out in just a few months. And what I got is a moratorium on payments for a year, and I took out $50,000, but I have to pay it back. And I'm already making payments for a mortgage on a building that has renters in it. And so, my renters are in trouble, and I'm in trouble right with them. So small business owners and renters are similarly on the brink. We're all going to go down together.
Wait, but your mortgage holder got paid. That was in April and May. We saw the trillions go to whoever wrote your mortgage. I'm not going to pretend to know. Is it Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whoever wrote that mortgage got paid. So why are you still why are you on the hook for making the payments if we as a public got together, as you said, and made that payment to them? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, why are we both paying them? That's a good question. I don't have the answer.
Me neither. So here we come now with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and they're working so hard on this bipartisan legislation. And I think the biggest pushback that we have seen so far is that it includes this provision that McConnell insisted on, where you cannot sue a business or a school district or whatever should you contract COVID as a result of everything that's going on. Do you have a problem with that?
The way I see it is the reason they held up the COVID relief is because Nancy didn't want to help Trump in the election.
Did she say that?
Did she say that?
Yeah.
Well, kind of, yeah, but
I think McConnell said that. He was very forthright in saying that let's not do anything before the election, let's hold off, and then Trump echoed that. But I don't know that.
Excuse me, we're not referring to him as McConnell anymore. We're referring to him as Dumbledore. Remember?
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yes, the Black Hand. So you can't really blame Pelosi for this, right? Because
no, I blame Pelosi. I blame Bernie Sanders. I blame Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I blame everyone that let that CARES Act go through with mere crumbs for the American worker. They had leverage back then. They had big leverage because they wanted to bail out the banks. They absolutely wanted to use the Fed and bail out the banks, and they would have done anything at that point to get it to happen. They would have agreed to $1,200 per month indefinitely at that point if the Democrats had been willing to play hardball, and not one of them was.
Okay, so you're going back to Bernie Sanders, AOC, and I think, we had the squad. There was a total of five progressives in Congress. What did you expect them to do? Because what would have happened was 5 votes no, and they were all running for office back then.
What about Mark Pocan? What about Pramila Jayapal? What about, the other progressives? There are at least 15 or 16 of them that could have said no. And if even one of them had said no and demanded a voice vote, then we would have been able to hold people accountable for the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history.
Wait a second. Wait. You just said something really important, and I want to focus on that. A single member of the House can call for a voice vote?
Yeah, that's what happened. One of the Republicans did, and then they voted down the voice vote. They said, no, we don't want a voice vote. We don't want to be held accountable.
Ah, okay. So
I think he was from Kentucky.
yay, Kentucky again, twice.
He was probably arrested in Canada then.
Right. Well, okay. So let me ask you this. We have John Delaney, who was arguably the least popular candidate running for president this cycle. He's out of Maryland. And he has brought up the suggestion, sounds reasonable, that if you want any more funding out of this next piece, and I didn't see a number. I don't know if it's another $1,200 check or $400, whatever it is. If you want to get paid out of the federal government coffers, he's suggesting that you must volunteer first to get a vaccination against COVID.
After the first round, it's all just posturing. It's all just gamesmanship. There isn't any point in all this stuff is just posturing. The COVID, everything is just posturing. They had one chance because that's when they had the leverage, because that's before they bailed out the big banks. After the money was created by the Fed and the spreadsheets were moved around and the big banks got their money, there wasn't anything anyone was going to do other than posture. They had one chance, they blew it, now we're fucked.
Okay, so how do you dig out of this, Allen? I mean, you're not happy with how this went through.
Revolution. You don't dig out of it. You just say, you screwed us. It's a duopoly. The Democrats and the progressives, in quote marks, and the Republicans are all equally culpable. They all need to be thrown out. We need to revolt. We need to go in the streets. We need to do massive wildcat strikes. We need to do what's going on in India and in France. And we need to say, fuck that shit. We're done. This government was written, our Constitution was written by white slaveholders in order to protect the power of the few. And that's where our Constitution came from. It was to protect slaveholders from the majority. They didn't want the majority deciding things, and they still don't. And the Democratic Party is anything but democratic. They don't want the majority to decide shit. So that's why we really have the need to throw the whole government out. We need to overthrow our fucking government and start over.
Well, those are some pretty strong words here, but if at this point,
Little bitches.
if at this point we don't have people in the streets with pink hats on, what's it going to take?
Yeah, those pink hat people, they got a lot done. No, we don't need the pink hat people. We need blood in the street. We need what's happening what was happening in Portland, Oregon. We need what was happening in Brazil and in big cities around the world where people are fighting back against neoliberalism. We all need to figure out that we're in this together. We need to stop our condescending, snarky, elitist attitudes and realize that we all need to roll up our sleeves and fight like workers fought in the Bolshevik Revolution.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm looking at the headlines and little things like John Delaney. To me, I'm not even going to pretend. That is a bait and switch. You are literally holding people hostage for crumbs in order to force them into an untested vaccine, which I myself, I don't know if I'm going to do it. I want to see the evidence, the data. I want to see exactly what's happening, because we all have a little bit of PTSD after this last 4 years and how things have been handled. I don't know. Was Rudy Giuliani on this task force? I just... It's
all water under the bridge. It's all after the fact. We lost our chance to do anything through political channels. Now we need to overthrow the government and do it ourselves.
So are you talking about scrapping the Constitution?
Yes. Yeah, the Constitution was written by white slaveholders to maintain power in the hands of the few, and it has served that function. That's how the Electoral College works. There are lots of very non-democratic aspects to our Constitution, and to our entire system. It was modeled after the Roman Empire, and it achieved a lot of the same things.
So what about the Bill of Rights? You've got this entire Bill of Rights, the amendments to the Constitution that were written by the least wealthy people in the Congress at the time for the benefit of the people after everything they just went through with their revolution. And that's held together pretty well. First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third, the Fourth.
Yeah, let's keep what's good about it. And we'll keep whatever works, and we'll throw out, because right now it's very difficult to throw out or amend things because of the way everything is constructed. We don't really have the referendum process in place where we can have direct democracy as opposed to representative democracy. And direct democracy would make the Bill of Rights a lot better. We could actually refine it, and we could take big money out of politics. The reason we don't take the American people would love to take big money out of politics. Conservatives and liberals and progressives alike would love to do that. But the system doesn't allow it because we're run by plutocrats, by fascist plutocrats.
So if we just then, just exploring this idea a little bit with you, but if we just got rid of the Electoral College and had something like ranked choice voting, would that be enough to stave off blood in the streets?
Why do you want to stave off blood in the streets? Are we too comfy to think that that's a good solution?
Well, because typically whenever there's you just talked about solidarity with other working people who work for a living, people who have to work for a living, people who cannot work for a living, and people who are retired. It's us that suffers. It's our blood in the streets. It's not going to be an elitist. That's why.
I don't know. I think there are guillotines for that. I think the point of that kind of a revolt is to spill the right blood.
So it kind of sounds to me like the face-eating cheetah club. It always sounds great until you're the one who's up in the guillotine, right? So what we've seen is there are enough people, like in the Trump camp, when we're doing away with human rights, and we're doing away with the Constitution, as we saw with Bill Barr and you brought up Portland and all of these other places. There were enough people who were defending that action against the Constitution, against people. So isn't that also an impediment to what you're saying about the right blood? There's enough people who are willing to stand up and speak out for the wrong thing that we cannot guarantee that they're going to.
Do you or do you not trust direct democracy? Or do you think that the people don't know what's good for them and they need to be managed by the elitist class, by the professional managerial class?
Oh, you're speaking of somebody who is in marketing. So
no.
You're right. So
the most evil profession of all.
Which is why they wouldn't let me write press releases, because I wouldn't lie. So there's the white hat marketing and then the black hat marketing. Look at the election in Georgia, the special election, and how that is playing out, right? Ossoff is a terrible candidate, terrible. And he ran for Congress before, was completely wiped out. Here they're propping him up again as a not Purdue, right? So, but it's the marketing that is putting him over the top. So here's the problem with direct democracy. You cannot just have direct democracy and a funnel of propaganda, because then you still don't have direct democracy, right?
Right, absolutely right. Yeah, you can't have the propaganda machine in place, and through direct democracy, we could make the propaganda machine go away and we could replace it with something democratic, because democracy needs to apply to the fourth estate as well.
Okay, so now what we're really talking about is public financing of campaigns, bringing back the fairness doctrine, holding journalists and news media accountable for their own ethics and conduct. Yeah, well, just on
Maybe
our team.
that's what we're talking about. We don't know. We don't know what the people will say until they actually speak. You're still trying to run things for them. You're still trying to operate on behalf of the people who don't know what's good for them, especially CovIdiots and such. If we don't trust the people to manage their own affairs, then we'll have some other form of tyranny.
Okay, so let's take the example of Medicare for all. You have a number of people who support it, but then the news media that's coming out about it, like Journal of American Medicine, a non-partial think tank for medicine, put out a study that said billions of dollars was spent in advertising against Medicare for all. So how then do you get the will of the people in an impartial way? How do they get to make decisions other than turning on the TV?
Referendum. Yeah, Mike Gravel has a great YouTube on that. Ron Placone interviewed Mike Gravel. It has hardly any views, but he laid it all out there. I'm going to do that on my show tomorrow. I'm going to tape it tomorrow. It won't come out tomorrow, but you can have a process in place that includes lawyers to make sure that whatever constitution we put in place is followed. But what it does is it allows the people to put a limited number, that was important in his explanation, a limited number of new pieces of legislation up for a vote. And if there is public support for it, it will pass. And we could apply those to campaign financing, but also to how the media work.
Okay, but Giuliani is a lawyer. Would you have him?
I think the people would have to decide.
Okay.
And if his marketing is really good, then we have to work on making marketing patriotic and democratic.
Okay, so we have one that I put out on my Facebook page, Heartland. Heartland is a far right, in my opinion. They call themselves conservative. Lobbyist group funded by Koch brother money and Democrats too, which is weird. So they are actually pushing back on Joe Biden with this new conspiracy theory, the Great Reset. They are very well funded. They have an entire team of lawyers. How do I get my message across to people to counter what's going on with them? Because right now, what is being said with QAnon and all of these other folks and what people are consuming is that the Great Reset is the new world order instead of what actually happened at the IMF and other conferences. So it's easy to say, oh, just let the people decide. The people decided that they wanted Trump. The people decided that it was okay. Everything that happened in the last 4 years, we had 70 million people decide that that was okay because it wasn't me and he's hurting the people that I hate.
You don't really believe that, right? You know that they were revolting not against 4 years of Trump alone, but 40 plus years of neoliberalism. The reason we have Trump is because of Obama. They're revolting against Obama too. They're revolting against even Jimmy Carter, if you want to go back. They're revolting against Ronald Reagan. They're revolting against Bill Clinton and both Bushes. And so that's the true revolution. The reason, so if you just blame Donald Trump for all that, that's naive, that's silly.
Explain that a little bit more, because I didn't see anybody saying I despise Donald Trump and his rhetoric, but I'm going to vote for him anyway because I hate Obama. Nowhere did I see that in talking with small groups, neighbors, things like that. So you disagree with this?
So you disagree with Chris Hedges, who says that we have Trump because of neoliberalism?
No, not at all. Not at all. What I'm saying is the 70 million who voted for Trump anyway, after what we saw in the last 4 years, where he was more of the neoliberal policy, handouts to the wealthy and trickle down. What after 4 years of that, they still voted for him because of the rhetoric and what they saw and were able to consume about him being anointed or whatever else.
What if you believe that Trump was a lesser evil as he was?
Well, that's what we saw in 2016. But this cycle, was he the lesser evil?
Yes.
Well, what changed? What changed in 4 years? For the people that decided to vote for Donald Trump in 2016, what actually changed to change their mind to vote back for the neoliberal regime? Absolutely nothing. Right? There was nothing that was different from 2016. You had a Hillary Clinton-esque candidate running for the Dems on an austerity model,
Yep.
right? Through a corporate elitist agenda.
Yep.
Right? There is no different. Like, it's so facetious for people to believe that the reason people voted for Donald Trump is because they're racist nationalists, right?
Good.
That's the mainstream media narrative from the Democratic Party trying to explain to you that Donald Trump is a bad person, and every single person that voted for him is racist, doesn't care, deplorable, blah, 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 and a Russian bot.
Excellent.
Right? That's exactly what happened.
If what you're saying, if both of you are right, then what happened during the primary? Because nobody came out for Bernie Sanders, few people came out for Elizabeth Warren. If what you're saying is true, wouldn't
election
there have been
fraud?
That is such an easy thing to say, but
it's true.
Where? If we're pushing back on the Trump campaign and saying the same thing,
I'm not pushing back on the Trump campaign.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to get back to that point, but let's go to the primary here. How was it election fraud? People just didn't turn out to vote for Sanders or Warren.
Let's bring Obama into it then. Let's just figure out what Obama did to scuttle Bernie and how the conspiracy worked, the cabal worked together. Clear back when they told Elizabeth Warren not to run against Hillary, and they told Joe Biden not to run against Hillary. But then after Hillary's turn expired, then they brought 16, 18, 22, I don't even remember how many. And they were paid through the Clinton machine. They were paid through the Clinton bundlers, through the talent agencies, Creative Artists Agency, United Talent Agency. All those people that came in were paid directly by the cabal to run against Bernie. They pulled out all the stops to defeat Bernie. So whether they used faulty ballot machines, whether they used, when they had tried to reduce voter turnout by making fewer balloting places around colleges and so on, the Democrats are just as good as voter suppression, if not better, than the Republicans. So behind Obama, the CIA, the deep state, the cabal, they took Bernie Sanders out through any means necessary. Bernie had 3 states in his pocket before Obama unleashed his anti-Bernie coalition, his conspiracy, and they took Bernie out. That's what democracy looks like. That wasn't a decision by the people. The wine moms, the comfy, the comfy people that like Elizabeth Warren and so on, the snarling, sneering, elitist Democrats, the people who are too comfortable to ever get in the streets and try to fix things, they're not part of any leftist coalition. I don't care what they call themselves. And they're the reason we have Joe Biden and Obama and the whole team behind him are the reason we have Biden. And that was rigged. That's rigged. And that's why we don't have Bernie. There was no way in hell they were going to let Bernie anywhere near the White House. And if, they hadn't been able to do it through the electoral process, they would have done it some other way.
Okay, so
yeah,
real quick,
I totally agree with that. Right. I South Carolina was the perfect storm for the Democrats to change the tide of the election because of Clyburn, because of Obama. They got all of the other candidates to drop out just before, except the one candidate that was able to take votes away from Bernie, which was Elizabeth Warren. And we know that through our discussions with African Americans in people like Glenn Ford and with Black Agenda Report, that have said that the majority of Black people will get in line behind white people that they deem are going to be ones that they're going to vote for to defeat the party of racism, right? Which is the Republican Party. That perfect storm lined up with Obama's help in order to change the tide to Biden.
Well, and John Conyers too. But real quick, Ellen, I got a couple comments that came in from our audience. And I'm just going to read them off. You respond to the ones that you feel like. So Joel says he's going back to the lesser evil. And he says, lesser than what? I mean, what bar were you using here? And he puts, a little confused emoji. And then Mike says, sorry, Alan, I'm getting nothing but a high school anarchist contrarian vibe here. Whereas Dave says, man, this guy has a point. So we get a little bit of a mixed reaction based on the commentary here. And I just got to say, for point of reference, in Illinois, the primary was in March. I had COVID. I could not go vote. And it was one of the states that the governor neglected, or for whatever reason, and I don't hold good feelings here, decided not to postpone it the way other states did. And we had Dr. Burdett, a virologist, professional on this, point out that was when Illinois started to spike out of control. So those decisions have consequences. To your point, Alan, by any means necessary meant the death of poll workers and people in Illinois. So, so now how do we?
Let's go back to the first. Let's just, before we get too far away to ever get back again. Okay. Let's just go one at a time. So what was the first one?
The first one, Joel says lesser. You talked about the lesser evil and lesser than what? I mean, what bar were you using here?
I wasn't using mainstream media as a bar, because if you follow Clinton News Network and MSDNC, the Washington Post, the New York Times, you're going to get a different picture of Trump than is real. And Andy mentioned that a bit ago. We have manufactured consent. The Caitlin Johnstone is great. She's in Australia. She's a great writer. She shows clearly how the mainstream media, working on behalf of the Democrat Party, are painting Trump to be something that he may not be. Now, Trump is an asshole. Trump is, a terrible person, but he's not the person that your marketers in the mainstream media painted. And so if you're comparing Clinton to the mainstream media picture of Trump, then obviously Trump is more evil than Hitler. Just ask Chris Matthews. And therefore you can't possibly argue that anyone's worse than Hitler except Trump. And so of course Clinton is better than that. But if you look at trade deals, if you look at incarceration, if you look at what went on, not with both crime bills, if you look what went on with him being the senator that worked on behalf of credit card companies in Delaware, if you look at his whole record, his working with segregationists, the school situation with desegregation, he is consummate evil. You can't say that Biden is not evil. And the fact that he's credibly accused of rape, the fact that the Me Too movement means absolutely nothing. If you look at everything against Biden, you have to say that's a pretty evil dude. And so you're looking at two incredibly evil people. If you could vote for either of those people, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and you need to say, hey, what about me? Am I qualified to call this commentator up somebody? I don't know what they're implying there, that first comment, because they just kind of trail off and they're not really saying what I say that they're evil. If you can vote for either racist rapist, you're evil.
Okay, so Dave actually clarified a little bit. He's like, he says, there's a huge uphill battle here. The way you approach this sounds crazy. Chris Hedges and Caitlin aren't wrong. They just sound crazy. So that almost sounds like marketing there. Maybe having a different approach and, a little bit of sugar.
How about just telling the truth? How about the unadulterated truth? And then if people can't figure it out, it's on them.
Okay, so I have another comment that came in here, and I think there's some point to this, because Jimmy Dore had a clip of a business owner in Michigan who at first you went, you mentally shut down thinking, oh, this is another Trumper, but I'm like, wait, no, he's got a point. Here's a business owner who is like, wait, they're giving all this money to the elites and all of these wealthy companies, but not to me. And we need to get together. And we're seeing all across the country. We had the story of the Denver mayor who gave the advice, don't go to Thanksgiving, while he's boarding a plane to go to Thanksgiving in Missouri, right? So we're seeing this all across the country. So Noble says, Noble's on Facebook, and he says, the mass lockdowns with no financial support to individual and small businesses is the US government's way of saying, go ahead, do your general strikes. We will starve you. And then he says, I suggest put your mask on and open up businesses. Fuck the government. And to Noble's comment, we opened the show with an example of where I had my mask on, a small local business, a local college was trying to do the best they could and actually went above and beyond what the doctor's office had done in the same town, same city, same governor. So I
think those are all good points.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all solid, valid points.
Okay, well, we got nothing to argue about then.
Yeah. So, Kerri, I wanted to say that I'm very proud of you. You played the devil's advocate there very well. It was almost an Oscar performance, and you did it without laughing or slightly throwing up in your mouth a little. That was quite well done. Thank you.
I was watching her face. She had a few moments where she almost slipped.
So the reality is, I am never going to fight somebody who, like I said, if you work for a living, you have to work for a living. You cannot work any longer, or you're retired from work. I am never going to fight you, and I'm never going to go against a Trump supporter when it comes to who they vote for. I'm never going to tell you who to vote for. It's my job to convince you on policy. And in the short time that I've been in this city, now I saw the shit show in Illinois, and those of you who know my background know that whole story. But the short time that I've been in this city that was doing so well, there are tents under overpasses here now. And even though it's not as cold as Illinois, it gets cold in the high desert. It's heartbreaking to me to go through these stories and see what other countries are doing, and to see how they are using an anti-masker or someone who, we've labeled to me, a CovIdiot is someone who knows the risk and puts others at risk anyway. I'm not talking about the business owners. We've got business owners out here struggling, putting the tents out, trying to do the best they can. It's, I think that this entire pandemic has been used as a further wedge between us, the us of the United States.
Of course, right?
Horrific.
That's a major component of it, right? We talk about wanting people to do the right thing, thinking and telling them that they need to do the right thing, or pretty much everybody in the United States is going to be adversely affected by this. So people, if we still are successful in making people understand that they need to mask, they need to social distance, right? They need to stay in their house as much as possible. That only works if your government does its part, and it's not even close.
Right,
and
if they're following their advice.
They're not, they have no incentive to, because although the election is over, they're still using this primarily as a political football.
And that to me is the very definition of evil, right? Evil is not just doing wrong, but encouraging others to do wrong and fomenting all of this discord. So on that note, real quick, before we get out of here this morning, because we can go on for hours about this subject, tomorrow night, Brandon has a really special guest, and you talk about somebody who is right out there poking the bear when it comes to corruption and wrongdoing. This is a gentleman who goes by the Devil's Advocate on YouTube. It's Dion McNeil. He is the old fashioned. I mean, I thought I was pretty bad as a muckraker. This guy, I look up to him completely because he's full on snark, pointing out the corruption and the wrongdoing and doing it all with publicly available information. So he curates all of this. His channel's on YouTube. He's going to be joining Brandon tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern live. So make sure you tune in, check that out. That is an amazing interview and I can't wait to see it. And then also I want to thank Allen, because Allen and I behind the scenes, sometimes we don't always agree, but I love that I never need to wonder where I stand. Talk about full on honesty. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So I talk about what you're doing with Howell Underground now, so people know what to expect when they tune in, and like and subscribe to your channel.
I guess you could expect to get more of similar viewpoints, but I curate, as you say, I curate a lot of excellent independent, and sometimes even from the New York Times and such, but you know, they get it right sometimes. But I guess the main function of this show is to curate good information that you won't readily find in the mainstream. And I also have a podcast called Revolution or Bust, and it's the same content. So I really appreciate your letting me plug both Howell Underground and Revolution or Bust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on this channel, we try not to censor. And as Brandon says, the best way to counter fascism is to have better policies. So it's our job to explain progressive policy, which is center. It is not far left. It is not far right. It is fiscally sound, socially responsible, helps working people. So it's our job to do that effectively, not necessarily shut down other viewpoints by just silencing them. That does nothing for anybody. So thank you so much for coming on. Hope to have you back here. And I look forward to some of the other content that you put out on your channel. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Andy, any closing thoughts? I mean, we covered quite a lot. A lot.
We did, and I can tell that you're emotionally exhausted now from this show. So I would suggest that you go lie down for half an hour and get your energy level back.
Get the vapors. All right. Thank you, everybody, for weighing in. Really appreciate the comments this morning and everybody joining the conversation. We will be back bright and early on Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. If you have a story or something you want us to cover, do some research, drop us a line. We can pick it up on our Facebook channel, YouTube, or Twitter, and we will cover those stories for you. So thank you so much and have a wonderful Monday.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G. What?